The thunder of hooves ripped through the streets of London as the royal cavalry marched in perfect formation. Horses gleamed beneath the gray skies, their riders in scarlet uniforms guiding them with absolute precision. Carriages trimmed in gold rolled forward as if carrying history itself. This was pageantry at its finest, an empire reaching back into centuries of tradition to welcome a guest unlike any other. And that guest was Donald Trump. From the moment he stepped onto British soil, the spectacle was designed to overwhelm. Polished boots striking in rhythm, royal bands filling the air with triumph, crowds lined along the Mall, straining to catch a glimpse. For Trump, it was everything he thrived on: ceremony, attention, the feeling that the world revolved around his presence. He raised his chin slightly, his expression caught between pride and defiance, basking in the display of royal honor. But even as the horses pranced in flawless symmetry, another sound began to rise just beyond the official line of sight. It was not the rhythm of drums but the roar of protest. Thousands of voices echoing through Westminster, shouting, chanting, refusing to be drowned out by pomp and pageantry. The contrast was startling. Inside the frame of ceremony, Trump appeared embraced by history itself. Outside, he was confronted by a tidal wave of anger. This was the paradox of day one. The monarchy extending golden carriage dignity, while the people filled the streets with rejection. Television cameras captured the majesty, the cavalry gleaming, the carriages glittering, but missed the tension building just outside the palace gates. To the protesters, no amount of horses or salutes could mask what Trump represented. To his supporters, the spectacle confirmed his power on the world stage. And so, London became a divided theater. The royal welcome was polished, flawless, rehearsed to perfection. The street protests were messy, urgent, and impossible to choreograph. Yet both were equally real, equally defining. By the time Trump's motorcade vanished into Buckingham Palace, one truth was clear. The stage was set for confrontation. The horses had played their part. The red carpets had been rolled. But the voices outside were only getting louder. Because after the last hoofbeat faded, London was about to erupt in ways no ceremony could contain. From the outside, it looked like pageantry: horses, carriages, handshakes, and smiles. But beneath the surface, Trump's arrival carried far more weight than ceremony alone. Britain was staggering through the chaos of Brexit, a nation unsure of its footing, desperate for allies. And here stood a U.S. president whose very name sparked division. Every step he took across London mattered not just for optics, but for politics, identity, and the future of two democracies bound together by history. For Trump, this was more than a state visit. It was a chance to project dominance, to remind the world that he could command the rituals of empire. For the British government, it was a gamble, risking legitimacy by embracing a figure loved and loathed in equal measure. And for millions watching from home, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Royal tradition draped in velvet against the chants of protest echoing in the streets. The stakes were enormous. Would this visit bind nations closer or fracture them further apart? Would it cement Trump's image as a global statesman or expose a chasm between pageantry and public opinion? What happened next would leave the world questioning both. The gates of Buckingham Palace opened with a grandeur reserved for history itself. Guards in tall black bearskin hats stood rigid, their bayonets glinting under the pale London sun. The royal cavalry wheeled into perfect formation, their horses moving with mechanical grace, as if centuries of tradition pulsed through every stride. And then came the moment. Donald Trump, escorted to the courtyard, greeted not as a controversial politician, but as a visiting head of state draped in the theater of empire. The Queen extended her hand with practiced poise, the image captured by dozens of flashing cameras. Trump's posture was firm, his trademark red tie striking against a stately backdrop. For a brief moment, the narrative was controlled, the pageantry overwhelming, the optics dazzling. Commentators described it as a show of friendship, of alliance, of two nations reinforcing a bond that had weathered wars, revolutions, and upheavals. Yet behind the spectacle lay layers of tension. The pomp was designed to project stability, but not everyone watching saw dignity. Critics at home and abroad recoiled at the sight of velvet carpet honor bestowed on a man they viewed as the embodiment of arrogance. Still, Inside the palace walls, the choreography unfolded with perfect timing. The gun salutes, the royal band, the polished courtiers guiding Trump through corridors lined with portraits of monarchs past. It was theater, glorious, extravagant, meticulously rehearsed, and Trump reveled in it, smiling as if the crown jewels themselves had been brought out in his honor. He understood the power of images, and these were images he would wield. Him, standing shoulder to shoulder with royalty, embraced by centuries of tradition. But even as he basked in the grandeur, the sound of protest drifted faintly from beyond the palace gates. While one world celebrated, another resisted. The horses may have marched in flawless symmetry, but outside, voices were preparing to shatter the illusion, because the story of this visit would not be written in gold trim or ceremonial handshakes. It would be written in the clash between spectacle and reality. And as the royal procession ended, the stage was already shifting towards something far less controlled. The next act would belong not to palaces, but to the people. While the carriages gleamed in the palace echoed with salutes, the real roar of London was rising outside. From Parliament Square, Trafalgar, streets swelled with people carrying placards painted in bold colors, some mocking, some furious, all united in defiance. The infamous Trump blimp, that giant orange caricature floating in the sky, bobbed above the crowds like a banner of resistance. Cameras tilted upward, capturing the surreal sight. A royal welcome on one side, a balloon of mockery on the other. The chants grew louder with every passing hour. No to hate. Not in our name. Students skipped classes. Families brought children, and seasoned activists unfurled banners that stretched across entire streets. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography of a different kind. The people had staged their own pageantry, one that countered velvet gloves with raw honesty. Social media lit up with images and videos. Hashtags trended worldwide as clips of the blimp soared across timelines, and chants echoed through live streams. Within minutes, the protest became global, a symbol that no amount of royal polish could silence the will of the people. To the protesters, this wasn't just about one man. It was about values. They marched not only against arrogance and division, but in defense of dignity, of inclusion, of voices too often dismissed. And in their defiance, they created a spectacle that rivaled the horses and salutes unfolding just blocks away. The contrast was electric. Inside gilded halls, Trump stood tall beneath chandeliers, shaking hands with monarchs and dignitaries. Outside, his image was shredded, lampooned, rejected by a sea of citizens demanding to be heard. And just when it seemed the protests had reached their peak, London unveiled a sight that stunned the world. An uprising of creativity, fury, and solidarity so powerful it threatened to overshadow even the grandest royal welcome. The stage was shifting. The streets had found their voice. And the message was clear. This visit would not be remembered for golden carriages alone. As the day unfolded, the cracks in the polished facade began to show. Inside the grandeur of official meetings, Trump shifted from ceremonial smiles to unscripted remarks that rippled across the UK political landscape. He praised allies one moment, then undercut them the next, tossing verbal barbs with a casual defiance that had become his signature. His comments about London's leadership, sharp, mocking, dismissive, landed like sparks in dry grass. The press seized on every word. Headlines screamed of insult and impropriety, while politicians scrambled to craft careful responses. Some tried to downplay the remarks as offhand bravado. Others condemned them outright as disrespectful to a nation already walking a tightrope through Brexit uncertainty. The tension, once confined to the streets, now spilled into diplomatic halls. For Trump, it was deliberate theater. He knew that disruption drew attention, and attention was his currency. For the UK establishment, however, the stakes grew heavier. To embrace him too tightly risked alienating their own people. To push back too strongly risked fracturing a vital alliance. Every word spoken in those ornate chambers echoed far beyond their walls. And as the news cycle spun, the stage was set for confrontation not just outside with protesters, but inside, with the global press waiting for answers. Because the real drama was about to unfold in front of cameras, where no amount of ceremony could protect him from direct questions. The press room was thick with anticipation, every camera light blazing, Every journalist poised like an archer, with a question sharpened into an arrow. Trump stepped up to the podium, shoulders squared, scanning the room with the confidence of a showman who thrived on confrontation. He adjusted the microphone, leaned in, and smirked. The first question cut straight to the heart. Critics in London were flooding the streets, the protests impossible to ignore. Did he believe he was truly welcome here? His response came fast, wrapped in sarcasm. He dismissed the demonstrations as small, insisted that the real people loved him, and turned the challenge back on a reporter with a jab that drew a mixture of chuckles and gasps from the crowd. But the reporters weren't finished. One after another, they pressed harder about his remarks on London's mayor, about his stance on Brexit, about whether his combative words weakened the very alliance his visit was meant to showcase. Trump parried, dodged, and then attacked, his tone oscillating between boastful and biting. Each exchange was a duel, and he relished every strike. Outside the press room, Twitter erupted. Hashtags blazed across timelines. Clips of his retorts went viral within minutes. Memes sprouted like wildfire, some mocking, others praising. Supporters framed him as unshaken, defiant. Critics saw arrogance laid bare. The room itself was electric. Reporters refusing to back down. Trump refusing to concede, the clash intensifying with every question. And then came the mic drop moment. When pressed about the protests, he declared, "I saw thousands cheering. The rest? Just noise." It was a line designed not to answer, but to dominate, leaving the room buzzing with disbelief. By the time the session ended, the spectacle had outgrown London. The battle between Trump and the press had spilled across continents, magnified by every headline, every clip, every post. And yet, the true shock waves were only just beginning to ripple outward. As the press conference wrapped, London streets told a different story. Protesters flooded iconic squares, hoisting balloons, banners, and chants that echoed against centuries-old stone. Social media magnified every moment. Clips of Trump's barbs spliced against images of roaring crowds, hashtags exploding into global trends. Across Europe, leaders and citizens alike weighed in, some rallying behind his boldness, others recoiling at what they called a dangerous arrogance. The clash wasn't just political. It had become cultural, a tug-of-war over values, identity, and the image of America abroad. Yet for Trump's base back home, this was red meat, a president standing alone against the establishment, undeterred by boos or banners. But for his critics, the outrage wasn't just about policy, it was about dignity, and whether America still embodied it. Day one of Trump's UK state visit wasn't merely ceremonial, it was symbolic. The gilded carriages and polished horses spoke to tradition, but the protests, the viral clips, and the bruising press conference spoke to a deeper divide. This was more than a clash of politics. It was a battle over truth and image, over respect and resilience. What lingered wasn't the pageantry, but the tension between diplomacy and defiance, between spectacle and sincerity. And yet, within the noise, a lesson emerged. True leadership isn't about drowning out critics with louder words, but about rising above them with dignity. Nations, like individuals, are judged not by how grand their entrances are, but by how gracefully they handle the storm. Day one reminded the world that power is fleeting, but respect, that must be earned. And so, the first day of Trump's state visit closed not with harmony, but with headlines, hashtags, and hard questions. The royal horses may have escorted him into London, but it was the roar of the people, the clash with the press, and the split reactions that defined his arrival. What happens next will shape not just the rest of his visit, but how history remembers it. Will this be seen as strength or arrogance, diplomacy or division? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the world is watching, and so are we. If you believe in stories that dig deeper, in narratives that pull back the curtain and reveal the clash between spectacle and substance, then stay with us. Because this isn't just about one man or one moment. It's about what we value as people. And here, at Argument Arena, we tell those stories with clarity, drama, and truth. So hit subscribe, join the conversation, and let's keep shining light where others settle for shadows.